Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 25 of the Progressive Democrats of Howard County podcast. I am one of the co-hosts, Jake Burdett, joined today with my other co-host, Hiruy. How you doing, Hiruy? It's been a little bit since episode 24. How have you been?
Hey, Jake. Hi, everybody. Yeah, Jake, I think the last time we had a recording, it was still cold out. It feels good. It's a beautiful weather, and happy to be recording this episode with you today, Jake.
Absolutely. We're a quarter of the way there to 100 episodes, so let's keep on this path. And yeah, it's finally warm out, so I should be getting a haircut soon enough. And as nice as it is outside and the weather's getting nice, unfortunately we've got a pretty troubling topic that we're going to be talking about today, and that is this sort of controversy that's been playing out over the last couple months that people have been following the news about an investigation that was done by our county auditor into our local library system, or more specifically, our local library system director, Tonya Aikens, allegedly for closing one of the county libraries earlier, several hours earlier than they normally do on a normal day, purely to host a private event for a private organization, the AKA sorority. So this has been all over the news the last couple months. People probably saw it as in the Baltimore Sun and whatnot. And I guess just to set the stage, I think we'll explain what the dominant narrative around this issue, which even after the report by the auditor was done into the library system, the resulting controversy led in a bill by Councilmembers Opel Jones and Christiana Rigby, who are, of course, close allies to the county executive, who has a lot of authority in appointing the heads of these different agencies. And so after this controversy, they introduced a bill to basically rein in the auditor's office, take away a lot of his powers, and allow the county council to have a lot more oversight, and reducing a lot of the auditor's independence to do these investigations. And their main justification for introducing this bill to disarm the auditor's office, and the main narrative around the auditor's report and investigation into the library director, who I believe is an African-American woman, Tonya Aikens. And so sort of the underlying narrative around this, just a couple days, I think, after the auditor's report came around, was you had council members Opel Jones and Christiana Rigby, again, close allies to the county executive, and I believe to the library director as well. Them and a couple other primarily African-American organizations in the county, organizations like the African-American Community Roundtable, sort of call this rally with a lot of the usual suspects that we see in the county of people highly connected to the political establishment. They call this rally together, basically saying that the auditor's investigation was, racially motivated investigation of a Black organization, and that both the investigation itself was not necessary and discriminatory, and the report that the auditor put out with their findings of the investigation were also discriminatory in the sense that it referenced the clothing and the race and the gender of the attendants of this sorority event at the Howard County Public Library, which the auditor's office ended up having to stake out outside of to investigate whether the claims were truthful or not. So that is sort of the predominant narrative that these organizations in the county that are connected to the local political establishment, including council members Opel Jones and Christiana Rigby and Calvin Ball, they come together call this press rally, get it in the news, and basically push the narrative that this auditor report was baseless, illegitimate, and racially motivated, or at the very least racially insensitive. And that's the narrative that a lot of people have bought into. But I think on this episode, we're really gonna at least attempt here to explain why this narrative is actually, very much false and being exploited by people in power in this county to actually harm the goals of integrity, accountability, and racial justice and racial discrimination. Um, and so that we just wanted to sort of set the stage on what they're saying so that we can sort of present our understanding and of what actually happened and why the predominant narrative is not correct. So here, I don't know if you wanted to comment at all on what the predominant narrative has been, or start breaking down, where it goes wrong, what's not accurate about it.
Yeah, Jake, at the outset, I think it would be worth us clarifying or at least explaining that both you and I were at the public hearings, and there were a lot of people there who I think based on their testimony expressed hurt due to the alleged conduct of the auditor's office. And I think the way that you describe the dominant narrative and the way that the establishment, I would say the political class exploits these issues, it's important for us to note that regular people know and feel that racism exists. There is systemic racism that, based on writings and based on various research, that our government systems are inherently problematic because of the embedded racial issues there. And so when the political class, whether it's the white or black political class, is aware of this and has, in fact, many of them were at the helm, at the seat, when of this inherently, systemically racist system. They know that this is a problem, and they know that people, just a regular person, that's what they know. So what we saw is this political class cynically exploit that vulnerability or that existing suspicion that the regular person has of our government system. So they're told, they're given these keywords. People are given these keywords that, look, this report says, it did a stakeout, and who else does stakeouts? Police officers do stakeouts. And what do police officers, what do we know about police officers? So like there's sort of a lot of subconscious associations that are being made and that are being exploited in here, and it's very dangerous. So for me, this is to say that there are people who hear this narrative and it immediately resonates, because that's what they know about the system. So this is not, I just want us to be clear, in our podcast, this is not to discount what you and I have acknowledged and we have lamented continuously, the issues with our government, the issues with, this systemic racism, and and so on and so forth. So if I'm sure there is going to be a political class that will listen to this and try to mischaracterize in a dishonest way. And so at the outset, I just wanted to clarify that. And having said that, just to add to what you mentioned in terms of what Councilmembers Opel, Jones, Christiana, Rigby, and the county executive Calvin Ball, and the Black leaders who participated in this exploitation of racial issues. This is just the latest episode of how they have exploited race for political gains, and we can, and I'm sure we're going to go back and recount on these issues. They did this during, when they tried to smear Councilmember Deb Young. They've done this, when the Councilmembers Opel Jones and Christiana Rigby introduced the so-called racial equity task force, and so this is part of the playbook, and it's definitely worth us to use the existing facts, which based on the library's report and the auditor's report, and explain to people or exactly what happened, and just push back on this cynical exploitation of race.
Yeah, and that's a very important point, and that's what's so gross about all of this is that it's very similar to what they do with affordable housing, which is also a very, very serious issue that should be taken very seriously. But they take these super serious issues that people know that the establishment knows that people hold sacred, and they do a bait and switch with them essentially, and falsely present themselves as champions on these issues, even though a lot of these people have spent literally decades defending policies and politicians that undermine these very same issues that they pretend to care about, whether it be affordable housing or whether it be racial justice and racial inequities. And so, again, we're absolutely, supportive of those goals of racial equity, of racial justice, but we're trying to say that the people proclaiming themselves as champions are basically wolves in sheep's clothing here, and they've been at this game for a very, very long time, and it's been quite beneficial for a lot of their, either political careers, social clout, or just general influence in the county. And so, yeah, you do have this weird class of people in the county who can just be deployed to defend whatever terrible thing the local county government's trying to do. And so, this is just the latest example of that, this auditor's report. And so I think now maybe we can break down a little bit, what exactly is misleading about this dominant establishment narrative. Why is it not what they say it is, this racially targeted or racially insensitive thing? And so I guess to just start debunking a couple of those false narratives that are being put out is, one, it's being framed that this was an investigation into the sorority, the AKAs, which of course is a female African American organization. And I just want to make very clear, that's not what this was. This was not an investigation into the AKA sorority. The AKA sorority is a private organization, trying to host an event at a facility that said, yes, you can host an event here. So that there's nothing wrong per se with what the AKAs did. What the investigation was into was Tonya Aikens, the library director, the head of the library system, and the way that she was potentially abusing public county resources and taxpayer dollars to benefit a private organization, which, yes, happened to be the AKAs. But the investigation was not into the AKAs. The investigation was into Tonya Aikens, the head of the library system, because that's who they have authority over, and that's who's working for the county, and that's who we expect to be working in the best interests of the county. And so this was not an investigation into a black organization, which was how it was being one of the main justifications for calling this a racially motivated report and whatnot. Other false narratives about what was going on is, they were saying, oh, why didn't you just ask them question? Why didn't you just call them? Why did you need to stake out the event and do an investigation? And the truth is that the auditor did go directly to the library system originally, and did go directly to Tonya Aikens originally, and got, less than satisfactory responses. And then also at the same time, when you're doing an investigation and you go ask the person being accused of wrongdoing, hey, did you do this? And they say, no, everything's up to snuff. The investigation's not over. Of course, the person accused of wrongdoing is going to deny the wrongdoing, but you have to dig a little bit deeper beyond just taking the suspect at their word, and you actually have to do an independent investigation to decide whether this was true or not. So it was not true that he never tried to work directly with the library system, but unfortunately, it only took a couple weeks for Tonya Aikens and the library system to completely stop cooperating with the investigation at all. Get the library board attorney involved, try to stonewall the investigation, shut it down every step of the way, to the point where the auditor felt that, he was not able to even fully do his job, and had to get approval from the county council members to say, hey, the library system's not complying with the investigation. Can you tell them that they have to comply with the investigation? And the county council gave him that authority, and still the library system refused to cooperate with the investigation. And so when people act like, oh, the stakeout, the investigation weren't necessary, you could have just talked to them, well, they weren't being cooperative at all. And so what choice do you have at that point but to do a stakeout and see, is this event happening as it was reported, or were we given a bad tip? Because this all did come from an anonymous tip originally. And so you have to do your due diligence to scope out the facts and make sure that it is as reported, to see if wrongdoing actually is occurring. Sort of one last piece that I would add of, another part of the establishment narrative is that they say, including the gender, including the race, including a description of the clothing of the meeting attendants, is not standard operating procedure for an auditor's report, and therefore that must be evidence that this was a racially insensitive or racially discriminatory investigation and report. And the way that's talked about, you would think that that's all the report said, was that, there was Black women in white clothing entering the meeting, because that's all that the establishment critics are harping on. But when you actually read the report itself, at least the original report, which was over 9 pages long, there's only 1 page and 3 bullet points that really makes reference to the race, gender, and clothing of the meeting attendants. And it was because they couldn't go into the event, and so they had to just stake it out and observe it and describe what they saw. And what they saw, maybe in all circumstances, it might not be necessary to describe the race, gender, and clothing, but this happened to be an event for an organization based on racial and gender identity. And it was an event where a certain type of clothing is customary for the event that was happening. And so that, to me, was why it was relevant details to include that at an event supposedly for an African American sorority, you saw African-American females wearing the traditional sorority garb. That to me is why those details would be relevant, because it corroborates the tip that was given to the auditor. And so, with some of these facts in mind, also I think it came out that the auditor, who I think is a white Australian man originally, it was the assumption for a long time that he was the one who wrote it, but I think it's since come out that I don't quite know the exact race of who wrote it, but it was not the auditor. It was, from my understanding, a non-white person who wrote the report. And so I think when you dig into the details of what actually happened, a lot of the establishment narrative sort of doesn't really hold up to tight scrutiny. And so that's why I think, sort of what Hiruy is describing is going on, of the establishment riling people up on this very sensitive and important issue of racial justice and racial discrimination, telling them this, very serious narrative is happening, getting them mad, getting them to show up at the county council meetings, just so that they can disarm a county auditor, which they've probably wanted to disarm for a very long time. And now they see their opportunity to opportunistically sink their teeth in. And so that is what I think is occurring here, somewhat successfully too. I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add about the details of sort of what actually happened and what was contained in the reports.
Yeah, Jake, during the public hearing, it was revealed, as you mentioned, that the person who actually conducted the investigation is a person of color. And for the longest time, the council members, Opel Jones and Christiana Rigby, and their associate, community leaders in the African American community who are riling people up, were making it look like it was the county auditor, the white county auditor, who conducted the investigation. And so clearly that's been debunked. And another thing is, it's a comment about timing. So but the report says that on October 4, 2022 was when an allegation through the waste, fraud, and abuse system, the anonymous system, was reported. Somebody submitted an anonymous report saying that there's an event on October 7, and staff are being asked to take leave, to stop work early at 2 p.m. on October 7, and so staff are being asked to take leave time. So and so after October 4, I think, based on the report, October 5th, there was a communication with Ms. Aikens' office from the county auditor's office asking about what's going on, and the Ms. Aikens' office provided explanations that were not satisfactory, because this event was characterized as the event description invite says by invitation only. Meanwhile, Ms. Aikens' office characterizes it as an open to the public event. And so between October 5 and October 7, 2 days, the investigator decided to look for themselves. And until after the day when the investigator witness what was going on, the investigation was not open. The investigation was opened after the county auditor, or in this case, the investigator, herself, prepared a memo and circulated it to the county council. And at that time, 4 council members signed off on the investigation. Council members Christiana Rigby, Deb Young, Liz Walsh, and David Youngman signed off on it. The only person who didn't sign off on this was Councilmember Opel Jones, it's been revealed since then it's been revealed that a relative is a member of that sorority that attended that held the event at the library. So to me, it's questionable that a council member who has signed off on other investigations. I've looked at an investigation that he signed off, recently for the volunteer firefighters, where all 5 council members signed off. That this one he didn't sign off. So to me, that's actually questionable that that he didn't do it. In any case, it seems like there was some fact finding that was done, and based on that fact finding, there was an investigation was initiated, and so this idea that it's really all this detail was lost. I mean, we were both at the public hearing. All this detail was non-existent. None of this mattered, and there was just a lot of people who were riled up, quite frankly, and historically, over the past few years, the county auditor's office has had perhaps, if you look at legislation that was passed or that was proposed over the past few years, there was one where a charter amendment was proposed where I think the county auditor would play a larger role in the county executive's annual process to update the county's credit rating, and that was shot down. I think 3 people supported it, and council members Opel Jones and Christiana Rigby did not support it. And more recently, the county auditor has been going back and forth with the county. Based on a PIA that I requested, it showed that the county has not been, the county executive or an administrator's office have not been cooperative on in providing certain information from the county executive's office on a few investigations that are ongoing. So ultimately, the goal, the establishment has its stated goal, publicly stated goal, and its underlying true goal. And as usual, the underlying true goal has more to do with dismantling systems of accountability and exploiting government for political gain rather than advancing the public interest. And in this case, the county auditor's office was was the target, Jake.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. The county auditor, showed himself that he's willing to go against potentially political allies of the county executive, and they can't let that happen. And so that's why you see this response. But yeah, I want to talk a little bit about, you know, why this sort of stuff seems to happen so often in Howard County, and why you would have a library director in Howard County who would do something like this in the first place, potentially abusing her authority for a private group like this. And the reason why is because, we talk about all the time on this podcast and in our group about uh, how sort of corrupt our local government elected officials are, at least a majority of them, definitely the county executive, definitely Councilmembers Opel Jones and Christiana Rigby, and even David Youngman quite a bit of the time. And unfortunately, it's pretty bad in Howard County, but that's pretty common in a lot of counties and definitely state and national government. Of you have corrupt elected officials taking a ton of money from these corporations, from these special interests. And of course, the corporations and special interests are donating with the expectation that the elected officials they're donating to are going to give them favorable policies, policies that are good for the special interests and bad for the community, because our taxpayer money is not being used in a way that's good for us, the people. And, that's a pretty nefarious agenda, but we all understand that that does happen at basically every level of government. But the next piece of that is these corrupt elected officials who have this nefarious agenda. They can't, the just because they're elected official, they're not, God, they're not a superhero. They can't just do whatever they want done. They need workers, the foot soldiers, the bureaucratic level of government who actually implements all these policies on a day-to-day basis. They need that bureaucratic layer of government to also go along with this nefarious agenda, not ask any questions, and not try to push it in a more noble direction. They need people who have just as little integrity as them, the elected official, basically. And so what those elected officials need to do if they want to be successful at pushing this anti-democratic agenda, they need to recruit people to serve in these bureaucratic positions who are going to turn the other cheek when something clearly unethical happens. And of course, a person with those qualities is also a person who's very likely to abuse their power, just like the elected officials. And so that's why you have somebody like a Tonya Aikens getting in this position of power in the first place. That's why you have her abusing the position of power. And that's why you have the council members who are also unethical coming out so strongly in defense of them, because they all rely on each other. They're all protecting each other, and they're all needed to get the corporate agenda passed, because you need the elected officials to pass it. And you need the bureaucrats in the local government to actually implement it on a day-to-day basis, not be a whistleblower, things like that. And so, I think Tonya Aikens is a very good case study of sort of what that leads to and how it can, affect county funds, even in ways that might not have been attended by the donor class. And a big question I have about this is, what are the other heads of our government, local government agencies doing? I'm not confident that we're not probably having similar abuses of power and wastes of taxpayer resources by these powerful bureaucrats in the county who are appointed by, corrupt politicians. And so that's why this move to disarm the auditor's office is extremely scary, because like we say, this move is a complete bait and switch, presenting it like it's going to help racial justice and racial inequity, when it's quite the opposite. And this is the point I made in my testimony on this bill was, um, the point of the auditor and the point of these investigations is to protect from waste, fraud, and abuse by government agencies, to make sure that taxpayer resources are not being wasted. And when taxpayer resources are being wasted and going away from public needs into private interests instead, let's be very clear about who this harms the most. This does harm Black and brown and low income people more than anybody, because when tax dollars that should be going to the county budget and the public needs are going instead to private interests, that means that the money's not going to education. It's not going to building more schools. It's not going to adding more seats in the classrooms, or hiring more teachers, or paying teachers better, or providing more hospitals in the county, or adding more affordable housing. And the list can go on and on and on. But all these are issues that, yes, affect everybody, but disproportionately affect Black and brown people. And so if, council members Opel, Jones, and Christiana, Rigby, if that's really their care and their concern, then they would be pushing for an actual, accountable investigatory office in the county that will make sure that these abuses of taxpayer dollars are not being done in the first place. And the real solution that we need for that is what Liz Walsh is pushing for, an Office of Inspector General. So, I ask people in the county, don't fall for the bait and switch. Don't fall for the manipulation of your emotions around a very serious issue. This is a very serious issue, and we need serious solutions. And that is a truly independent Office of Inspector General, free from political influence, so that they can really make sure our taxpayer dollars are being used for what they're supposed to be used for, especially at a thing like the library. And we've seen in Baltimore City and in Baltimore County just how much of a positive impact an Office of Inspector General can have in just a couple of years. So we desperately need that in Howard County.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Jake. And I think one technical reason and very important reason why an OIG is needed is, to a certain extent, I do agree with Councilmember Liz Walsh's description of the problem, and I think it might have been her or someone did that said, the county auditor's office has somehow evolved into addressing all kinds of issues, waste, fraud, and abuse, and it's become the de facto entity that addresses or deals with potential misconduct and abuse of power. And an OIG, I think, especially an OIG that's equipped with the power to issue subpoena, and as you said, free from political influence, free from coercion, could conduct this, such an investigation. And perhaps, just thinking about how this investigation could have played out, the auditor's office needs to go to the county council to request a subpoena, and the county council would need to vote, as a political entity, would need to vote on this, and to issue a subpoena. And there's no way they're going to do that. So an OIG equipped with that authority would not need to go to any political office to issue a subpoena, and they would just issue it, and it would compel employees, it would compel the library president to cooperate. And if they don't cooperate, then they would go to court, and the court would, at some, it's going to escalate, but there would be a process to ensure, that's free from political influence. There would be a process to ensure that there's compliance. And so that's, I think, the major reason why I feel like we need this so badly, in Howard County. And to your point of what other branches of government, or what other administrators are like, what are they doing? you know, we were talking about this, you know, earlier. The Howard County Library System prepared a response to the auditor's investigation, and the report, you know, in the auditors, well, the library system's response mentions, you know, and I quote, this is on page 6, bottom of page 6 of the library systems report. It says, with regard to the auditor's report observation that a black and gold Howard County Sheriff's Office pickup truck was parked in front of the library entrance during the event, the committee, which is the board committee that perhaps, you know, the Howard County Library System Board Committee that conducted this investigation, has determined that the Howard County Library System did not request the presence of the sheriff's office or of a sheriff's office vehicle at the event. Okay, so then who did? Did the sheriff's office decide to go on it, you know, decide to send one vehicle on its own volition? Is that standard practice by the sheriff's office to do that at all events? Is that part of the sheriff's office role? And so, you know, I think that's you know, that's a question that's still outstanding that has not been you know, answered, and it was really pointed out by the library system. It wasn't even part of the Howard County, you know, the auditor's office, you know, topic of investigation, but I think it's worth looking into. And then another thing is, you know, just look at how quickly, and this is the point of, you know, how you mentioned, you know, the people that are enlisted to provide political cover and political support. The board, the Howard County Library Board chair is Board of Education member, Tonya Watts. She's the board chair, and her, you know, she was directly involved in preventing this investigation based on the email exchanges from moving forward, or at least her position was involved in this. And so the Howard County Library Board, the Board of Trustees, many, you know, they're appointed by the county executive. This whole system of people, political appointees, and you know, political class rallied behind, you know, this behind this person who was being investigated, and helped provide cover. And I would point out that if there was not support and comfort from the top of the county, which is the county executive's office, they would not have been this defiant to an investigation. So clearly there was cover, clearly there was coordination to provide support and to provide cover and to impede this investigation from going forward, and from you know, and from providing the findings that, you know, that would have led to perhaps policy changes. And I just want to point out, you know, another thing, Jake, from the library systems report. It says, you know, just going to read it quickly. In response to the inquiry regarding whether ACLS staff spent time preparing for the October 7 event, you know, doing different activities, specifically, the committee said it has determined that ACLS staff disconnected computers prior to the event and reconnected them after the event, and finds this to be an appropriate use of staff resources. I disagree with that. I don't think, asking staff to work on, disconnecting computers to or to do a job that they wouldn't do, but for this event taking place is considered an appropriate use of staff resources. And so that's problematic there, Jake.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as Hiruy pointed out, that was another piece of the establishment's, false narrative, is that, they had this pretty damning auditor's report come out. And so they need to play defense and try to go on the offense. They say the best defense is a good offense. And so that's when they call this press rally and put out the narrative that it's a racially motivated thing. But also part of the narrative was, after the auditor put out his report, which again, important to note that the auditor's report actually makes no final conclusions or findings, because he says in his report, I wasn't able to because I was stonewalled. And so I'm just reporting what we were able to find, but we weren't able to reach a conclusion because despite having a vote from the county council member for them to comply, they're not complying. So they're making it impossible for me to complete the investigation. But nonetheless, he put out his report. And so the library system, one of the reasons they weren't complying is they were trying to argue that the auditor's office didn't have legal authority to audit or investigate their library system board in the first place, which I think they got opinion from the county solicitor that said otherwise, that the county auditor did have the authority to do this. But nonetheless, the library system, headed by Board of Education member and ally to the county executive, and Tonya Watts, to put out this counter that we're doing our own investigation. And the narrative around it is that it completely debunked the auditor's report, full exoneration of Tonya Aikens and any wrongdoing on the library system's part. But even when you read their actual report itself, it did not even with an obvious bias going into it, it really did not fully exonerate Tonya Aikens in the library system, and did not say that there was no wrongdoing. In fact, one of their findings was that potentially a county policy might have been violated, because when they closed the event, or when they closed the library early to the public so that they could host this event for the sorority, there's a question of, okay, well, what do the staff members do? Do they stick around and get paid for it, or do they go home and just get the day off? And if they do get the day off, are they paid for it? Or are they not paid? And so, I think the library system itself acknowledges this is, what page of the report is this? Page 9 of the library system's report. They said, this is misleading, but they said the committee has identified no costs incurred by HCLS for this event, other than ongoing fixed costs of operating the central branch building, such as utility costs, etc., but recommends that the board further review whether employee leave was granted that would not otherwise have been granted had the outside organization's event not been held. So essentially, they are acknowledging that, okay, maybe a policy was violated. Maybe this did actually cost the county funds that in the form of paid leave hours that would not have been taken otherwise. And so I think we need to look into whether the county has a use it or lose it policy. But the point is, even this biased attempt to save face still does acknowledge some wrongdoing. And Hiruy brought up the thing about the sheriff's vehicle that was suspiciously parked outside of the event. And this is from the auditor's report when he initially reached out to the library. This is page 3 of the auditor's report. He apparently he was told before the event happened that the chapter he was told this by the library system, that the chapter has hired security and chapter members are staffing the event. So if the sheriff's car was seemingly the security, and the county saying we didn't tell the sheriff to be there, that makes me question, okay, well, if the sorority's claiming that they hired security, did they hire the sheriff to provide private security at a private event? And if so, is that normal? Is that, is the sheriff's services available for rent for private organizations? If so, I did not know that. And so those were sort of my last thoughts. But I guess one other thing I did want to add was, you know, let's just think about how successful, sadly, the establishment has been at running this playbook that, again, they're very experienced with running. Like, really, what the headline should have been is, county is investigating county library director for potential abuse of county funds for a private organization, something like that. And maybe it was an accident. Maybe she wasn't trying to do something wrong. But that's what the heart of the matter should be. That's what the focus of the discussion should be. Should be into the library system and whether she was using her power correctly. But the establishment has so successfully changed the narrative to not be about that, and to instead be about the person who is investigating her potential abuse of power. He's the person who needs to be reprimanded. He's the person whose reputation needs to be dragged through the mud and question their integrity, not the person who actually potentially was abusing the office. But they completely reversed the victim perpetrator role here and are painting the investigator as the person who needs to be disarmed. And the reason they do this, again, is to, shock doctrine, push for something they probably already wanted to push for a long time, of disarming this pesky investigator who's going to, blow open their little schemes. But also, they need to rehabilitate the image of and exonerate Tonya Aikens, the library system director, so that she doesn't have this reputation as being this corrupt, unethical person, which she probably is. And they were just able to do it so quickly, to the point where, like, literally less than a month before this controversy is happening, is already another controversy with our library system, and that is the new announcement of this new lakefront library that they're going to build near the lakefront, which they were just a couple weeks before that saying that the lakefront was dying and nobody wants to be at the lakefront and the space isn't worth anything. But now, they're inviting Wes Moore to the announcement ceremony, talking about this is some of the best open space in the county, which it probably is. But now they're building this new library at a location where we already have a library, spending over $100 million on it, which could build an entire high school in Elk Ridge, which I think they've pushed 10 more years plus down the road. Could have fully renovated Oakland Mills for all those, people who care about, claim to care about educational equity. Could have fully funded renovations for Centennial. Could have built a bunch of affordable housing. But instead, it's going to this weird pet project that people in the community weren't really asking for in the first place. And the reason why it's important to bring that up is, again, this happened probably like 2 or 3 weeks after the CB11 hearings regarding the auditor bill. And who do they have front and center at these ceremonies? Tonya Aikens, the head of the library director. And so this stuff is still happening. This is why these people are there, is to push these private projects and special interests and act like it's in the public's interest and that we should be super excited about it. And it really annoys me that, these people should be ashamed. These people should be nowhere near any position of authority or power, and they should be ashamed to even be like showing their faces in public. But because of these media narratives, which shame on the media for going along with it, but these people feel emboldened instead of embarrassed.
Yeah, I don't think I could have summed it up any better, Jake. And I think my last takeaway point would be just to say, if you hear the white and black political class talking about race, gender, and other issues, and trying to rile people up, you need to reach reach for your wallets, because ultimately they're coming after your taxpayer dollars. Because this is ultimately about exploitation of taxpayer dollars to benefit corporate gain. And as you mentioned, the new central library that they're planning is right now slated to cost $144 million, and they're going to destroy an existing library that perhaps could be renovated just so that they can make way for an exit ramp off of 29 on the location where the existing library is for Howard Hughes Corporation. And ultimately, these groups, the people in power, are there to ensure that Howard Hughes and other entities, to facilitate the needs of Howard Hughes and other entities. And they can't do it when there's oversight. They can't do it when there's systems of checks and balances. And so they have to dismantle them. And that was their attempt at doing that with the CB 11. And so just a sad display, very sad display of I don't call it leadership. It's just, you know, preying on people's vulnerabilities, and it's disgusting. So yeah, that's all I have to say on that, Jake.
Yeah, I guess I'll just end by saying, you know, I don't know if we ever talked about what the outcome of CB11 was, so I'll just talk about a little bit about the specifics of what this bill what would have done and what ended up happening with it. And so CB11 again was the bill that Opel Jones and Christiana Rigby, allies of the county executive and library director, introduced off on the back of this, you know, false narrative that this was a racially motivated discriminatory investigation report. And so they took that narrative and used it to justify this bill, which, you know, I said earlier, it disarms the auditor's office, but specifically what it does is it basically, before the auditor can do any sort of, you know, special investigation like that into a county agency or something, they basically have to tell the county council, who, that's as political as it gets. The elected county council members very close to the county executive and the appointed members of government. The auditor basically has to tell them in thorough detail what the allegation is, what they want to investigate, what the investigation is going to look like. It basically requires the auditor to like fully project to the county council what they plan to do with the investigation. And this was framed as a way, oh, this increases oversight, which is the same excuses that they used in Baltimore County and Baltimore City to try to disarm the Office of Inspector General there, who was, you know, going after allies of the county executive for genuinely terrible things that they're doing. And so the county executive's allies on the county council try to make these same reforms, but really it's disarm attempts. But they used all the same excuses. And so they presented as, oh no, we're just here to provide oversight to this out of control rogue auditor who really should be fired, but we can't do that. So we'll just do oversight. And so that was sort of the narrative behind it. But really what it would give them the ability to do is find out before the investigation happens exactly what the auditor's plans are, so that they then have a heads up, can give a warning to the person being investigated, can tell the county executive what the plans are, so that they can make arrangements ahead of time to stonewall, obstruct. And so this would just, you know, that's what they're saying it's going to do. It's to provide oversight, but really it's to shut down any legitimate investigations from happening into their political allies, which we all know are very, very corrupt. And so with this powerful false narrative, they mobilize, you know, a lot of the or not a lot of the local black community, but members of the local black community, but specifically from the AKA sorority and other, you know, well-connected you know, organizations in the county, had them all come testify about how much of a racist witch hunt this was and how we need CB11. You had people like us, you know, testify trying to, you know, against it, calling it out for what it really was. But nonetheless, the bill, it ended up not passing in its proposed form as Opel Jones and Christiana Rigby wanted, but it did still pass, unfortunately, which I'm not thrilled about, but it was able to be watered down a little bit with some amendments so that the county council doesn't have quite so much oversight onto it, and not as much ability to tie the auditor's hands behind its back. So what ended up being passed was not as bad as what was originally proposed. I still think the bill probably should have been killed. But what we really need to reiterate is an Office of Inspector General, truly independent Office of Inspector General, to provide oversight and make sure that our county funds are not being abused. And we've seen it's very effective in Baltimore City and Baltimore County. There's a reason why the establishment's fighting so hard against it here, because they know that they've got a lot of skeletons in the closet that they want hidden forever. And so, I don't think Liz Walsh has introduced this Office of Inspector General bill yet, but she has publicly declared her intent to introduce it. And so I think we'll definitely be following that fight. I hope the community follows that fight and submits testimony when the time comes. So that's all I have here. I don't know if you have anything, or if I could wrap us up.
Yeah, no, that's all I have too. Just wish everybody good spring season, and hopefully we'll be back soon on another topic, and yeah, have a good one.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody. This was a big chapter for us, closing out episode 25 of the Progressive Democrats of Howard County podcast. Follow us on social media, subscribe to our email list, become a dues paying member. You can do all of that and more at our link tree at linktr.ee/HOCO progressives. Other than that, take care, and we'll see you all soon for episode 26.